What's up, guys? Before we start this episode of the SnoopCast, I would like to let you know that this episode is sponsored by Anchor, a free platform for podcast creation. Because of Anchor, we are able to host our podcast on several podcast services like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public. If you enjoy our work, follow us on the platforms listed. Thanks, guys, and enjoy the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the SnoopCast. I am your host, Brucesnoop, and we have Ian. He's joining us today. Say hello.
Hello there, everybody.
And we have Cream Man back. Say hello, Cream Man.
Hey, it's me.
And we actually have a special guest today. We actually have our good friend Carter. Say hello, Carter.
Hey y'all, what's going on? Happy to be here.
So, what do you do, Carter? Let the audience what you do on the internet.
Yeah, so I do some tweeting, and I'm a college student. I'm graduating in a couple days, and I studied philosophy and political science and history. I do some stock trading, and I just kind of I'm an America First conservative, and I'm on Twitter, and I'm a big supporter of Nick Fuentes and the America First movement, and I was invited to come on, and I am glad to be here. So
Yep, I actually met this guy recently, Nick Fuentes, who is a popular right-wing streamer. He actually just hosted a rally, a Stop the Steal rally in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I was actually had the pleasure of meeting Carter actually at the rally, and it was actually a lot of fun. It was fun looking at the speeches and going through this little march. It was actually a lot of fun.
yeah, it was a good rally. It was nice to meet you, of course.
It was also nice to meet a lot of people. We met Patrick Casey, Nick Fuentes. I didn't get to meet him, but I did see Ethan Ralph was there, and who else? Baked Alaska was there. I know that you were on Baked Alaska stream a lot, so
Yeah.
it was fun though. It was a lot of fun. So actually, I do want to talk about maybe a little bit of politics. One video that Carter recently got a little bit of fame. Could I say fame? For
Yeah, a little bit of internet notoriety.
Carter. I think it was a while ago. Carter did a stream about the Great Reset. Is there anybody here that would like to explain what the Great Reset is for anybody who doesn't really know what it is?
Yeah, I mean, what the Great Reset is, of course, initially, just like any other, manifest truth, it's a quote unquote right-wing conspiracy theory. And now it no longer is, because the World Economic Forum openly promotes it. But it's, an economic reset and a restructuring of the economy in a fashion that's going to greatly benefit, our corporate oligarchs and multi-billionaires at the expense of small business owners and, middle-class families, and as a result of the sustained attack on these people, the middle class, and people who own businesses and restaurants and bars and things of that nature, people who are supporting their families by the businesses they've started and run. And, that's what that is. And, it's been greatly accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic, in which, businesses remain shut down in states like California, New York, and, as Amazon and Google and Facebook and Microsoft are continuing to set, record numbers with their profits and with their engagements and things of that nature. So that's ultimately what, the Great Reset is, an absolute transference of wealth from the 99.999% to the top 0.0001%.
That's actually a pretty good explanation, actually. And it's kind of funny to see a lot of people in the media kind of say this is kind of like a right-wing conspiracy, even though, kind of in the same lane, you have the World Economic Forum literally talking about it in detail,
Well, that's how it goes, right? They tell you you're crazy while they tell you what they're gonna do to you at the same time. It's like this double speak. It just keeps happening. Like, how many times is this same exact sort of deal? I mean, this is an extreme example, right? But even like climate change, you think of like global warming, right? There in 2001, they were saying that New York City was going to be underwater by 2008. I mean, Al Gore won a Nobel Peace Prize for that, for saying New York City would be flooded by 2008. And so now, if you deny, you deny climate change, you're a conspiracy theorist, blah blah blah. It's like they constantly every single thing that they can lie to you about, they will. Their whole business, right? The business of the media is to support the institutions that have power. If you look back to this country's founding, right? You look back to the very start of the press, the very start of freedom of press can be found in the such events as the Boston Massacre, where the media actively lied and exaggerated the Boston Massacre to steer tensions and profit off of the outrage. Like, going back to the very beginning, the media is the enemy of truth, the enemy of justice, and the enemy of the people.
And it's very scary that that they have like the power that they do, and that like you would think like after like 2016 and the massive victory that the president, especially here in the States, had, that there would be more and more people rising up and saying like, look, we know that this is bullshit and we're not going to take it anymore. But they still have the means as to how to do this. They haven't given up. And in fact, they've already sped things up because of like this whole lockdown stuff. It's very threatening, to say the least. But, all we got to do is just keep fighting the good fight and pushing forward what we think is right, man. Because like the only way that we're we have our freedom taken away is if we basically give it to them.
Yeah, that's definitely true, and I think one of the major catalysts of this, of their kind of control was definitely this kind of this election. It's so clear that we saw voter fraud at a level that was never seen, but anybody who talked about it was kind of like a right-wing conspiracy theorist, and especially this was I would even venture to say that was a kind of color revolution. You see a lot of the color revolutions that were happening in former Soviet countries like Belarus and Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and especially other countries like in Ukraine and in currently in Belarus right now, actually, and also in Lebanon. This was kind of like the major catalyst that big corporations and the deep state were trying to do to like kind of unravel this kind of populist revolution that people like Donald Trump kind of brought forward.
I mean, yeah, these sort of populist elements are very scary to your neoliberal masters. They want control, right? And because of the nature of a liberal democracy, because of the nature of the political machine that is in control of most of the world at this point, and its reliance on money in order to maintain its power, it needs to impose this idea that basically they are the only alternative to some sort of ruinous, destructive force. So they do everything in their power to brand anyone outside of their sort of ideology, their sort of global system. They brand them as tyrants. They brand them as, even just like socialist, dictator, any like fascist, anything to get the people afraid of any sort of change. And the thing about populism at its core is that it's non-ideological. The whole point of populism is that you're representing what the people actually want. And if what the people want and what they realize they want is not the same as what the elites are giving them, that eventually it's going to cause issues. Like we're seeing this growing resentment. Yeah, we're seeing this growing friction that's been ramping up over the last 4 years. And even longer than that if you've been paying attention to Europe in particular.
And actually, it's actually kind of interesting. I'm actually going to talk a little bit about maybe a bit of like Salvadoran politics over here because my family is from El Salvador. And recently, actually, this was maybe only in the past few years, there's this new leader of El Salvador. His name is Nayib Bukele. He was originally from the left-wing party, but then the left-wing party kind of kicked him out because he was too populist for them. And so anytime he would run with any kind of political party, the institutions, the elites in the country would kind of shut it down because there was a sort of populist energy to him, right? And recently, I mean, it was only last year that he was elected president of El Salvador. And you see the media machine is churning. Everyone's a lot of them were calling him a fascist, a dictator. They were insinuating that he was going to start a coup in the country and they would harken back a lot of these the rhetoric to like, oh, he's going to bring it's going to be chaos like during the Civil War, what happened during the Civil War in the 80s. Even though he has done some things that are that people would say autocratic, but it's in a way that that actually helped the people. He's been combating MS-13. He's been combating like kind of the inequalities that are happening in the country, kind of making life better for the average Salvadoran, especially the elites in both the kind of the grifter right and the grifter left. It's kind of taking away control from their own power because they don't want to see normal people have their own prosperity. So they try to brand all of his supporters, brand all of his all of his cabinet members, brand him as a fascist or a dictator. That's just like a small example of many other people here in the Americas and then in Europe and especially in Asia.
Well, usually I think, right? Think about the story of Robert Mugabe, right? So when he rose to power, he was kicking out white farmers, killing white farmers in a communist revolution, right? And he was a hero. He was liberating the people of Zimbabwe from Western imperialism, right? Oh, he's such a hero. Then he bans gay marriage. He does all these things. He returns to his Catholic roots and makes Zimbabwe a conservative Christian nation. And only at that point is he violating human rights. Only at that point is what he's doing wrong. Not when he's killing white people, but when he bans gay marriage. That's the line. And you remember why the U.S. in the Obama administration had its conflict with Russia, right? What started it wasn't any invasion of Ukraine. It wasn't anything like that. It wasn't any war. It wasn't any expansion. It was that homosexuality was illegal in Russia. That was the cause of the Russian-American conflict. The same idea, the same thing that was illegal up until, or was even being gay was illegal in the U.S. for the most part, up until like the 60s, effectively. And yet now we are going to cut our foreign relations, embargo nation because of that policy. It's all about power. It's all about control.
If I could butt in a little bit, because I think those are good points. And one thing I was thinking about, Bruce, when you brought up, the El Salvadorian president, and we're conditioned to hesitate when we say things like, oh, even if they've done something that's a little bit autocratic. Well, here's what we have to think about. I mean, these are contrived terms that are created and assigned this. Well, yeah, and by institutional academia, and other entities that, we're automatically supposed to associate this negative connotation, ascribe this negative connotation to them in order to reject them. And so what we've been taught, one thing I realized throughout my college education, I think this sentence kind of sums it up nicely, is that, we've been taught to sort of uncritically accept democracy as the uniform prescription for successful governance. And so, but in reality, where has liberal democracy gotten us? It's gotten us to the Great Reset. It's gotten us corporate oligarchs. It's gotten us where we're at now, where there's mass discontent. And so these people in power activate the forces of academia, Hollywood, the military industrial complex, the CIA, intelligence agencies, whatever, in order to suppress things like populism and suppress a movement of the people where they're actually advocating for things that'll make their lives better and want to install leaders that will affect that change. And then conversely, when we talk about something like, what was just mentioned about Russia and the conflict of, they're homophobic. You have to understand when we're talking about something like neoliberal moral imperialism, it's just a new shift of, the scramble for Africa or whatever, like actual quote unquote imperialism or colonization where we plunder, other countries, even though, plundering I think is used very loosely, but that's of course the way it's described to us in school or what have you. It's all, and like you said, it's all about power. And so when we're going to get to a point where like and maybe it's not Joe Biden, but there'll be a point down the road where Democrat presidents will say like, they don't have drag queen story hour. Like we have to invade them. And people will be like, yes, like it's so true. Like good point, and it's just crazy. I mean, people, I was thinking today, and I never wear my mask. My state, the state of Kentucky, has mask mandate because we have a Democratic governor, unfortunately. And so I never wear masks. And so I was grabbing some dinner tonight, and I was thinking about how people say kind of normies, like normie conservatives will be like, you're brainwashed, and I thought about that, or you're a slave. And I think that word doesn't even go. I prefer the word zombie, because these people like don't even have, slaves at least had receptors and at least were sentient and understood what they were doing. They just didn't fight it. Whereas, I literally think zombie, I mean, these people are half dead. Like they just kind of go wherever they're directed. And so it's just very, very interesting. Like we're actually, I think about this, like, I wonder when it'll be when Joe Biden said, like this regime is unfriendly to LGBTQ rights. We have to invade them and like topple this dictatorship. And Liz will be like, so true, like so true. I'm so glad we have a president who fights for international human rights, and it's just amazing to me, like how stupid, so many people are, and even conservatives. But so, yeah.
Well, it's like the thing, right? It's like even the left suffers this sort of thing where you see the actual real legitimate like Marxists are like, they have to facepalm every 5 minutes because they see that even they have been totally disenfranchised. They're like Karl Marx in the Assassin's Creed game, talking about how we need to respect elections and how liberal democracy is the only way forward, when he said the exact opposite in his writings. It's like they not only are they actively suppressing you, actively pushing down upon you, but they're actually lying to you and creating these historical mythologies that suit them, and the masses believe it openly and wholeheartedly, and spend all their time fighting against each other. That oh, you're a socialist, you're a fascist, you're X, you're Y.
Well, what it is I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what it is that they want us looking around but never looking up.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
That's what they want, is they want us to look around but never look up. And that's why, after 2008, after the financial crisis, and I've tweeted about this before, but what it is that, banks realize, holy shit, when we engage in blatant, malpractice and really screw a lot of people's lives over, they get angry. Like they want to, people wanted to let the banks fail. And what did they do? They activated Barack Obama, who was the candidate for hope and change, to get on the floor and be the one that pushed the bailout of the banks through. And so what the corporations realized after 2008 was, oh my God, like we can continue to just zombify these people on the left, and get them to a point where, since they since they control the culture and pretty much every institution, all we have to do is make them care like a lot about, ultimately inconsequential social issues. And as long as Amazon just tweets out, on this day, we remember the sanctity of Black trans women's lives, they'll let us do whatever we want.
That's how it goes, right? Well, for the left and the right, this has been going on not since 2008, but forever. I mean, the most famous example of them doing this to the left was the the Congress for Cultural Freedom, which was a CIA program in the 60s. I believe it started in the 50s, but it hit its peak in the 60s, where their goal was to basically take these cosmopolitan left-wingers and indoctrinate them into this progressive liberal moralism, so they'd be separated from the conservatism of the Soviet Union under Stalin. Because remember, that Stalin was extremely socially conservative. So this idea of a soft moralistic socialism has basically taken all of the revolutionary spirit out of the left, and all that they have left to suppress really is the dissident right, and they cannot manage that. Thankfully, the dissident right seems incapable of being integrated into the system, at least not totally. That seems to be the vector of hope.
Yeah.
So I don't mean to move on, but I do want to talk a little bit about some other topics that kind of Carter's followers did bring upon. And as we're recording this, it is December 16th, 2020. And on Monday, the Electoral College went to their respective states and allegedly voted in favor of Joe Biden as president of the United States. So somebody asked us to talk about Trump's chances for this and the next election cycle, and Trump's personnel decision making, also the future of America First / the GOP.
We'll see what happens. If Trump's going to declare martial law, whatever. It's hard to say. We'll see what happens with this little report tomorrow, the DNI report. I'm always gonna hold a sliver of hope until Biden actually puts his hand on the Bible. But we'll see. But I'll tell you one thing to draw out a little bit. If President Trump does lose, it's going to be a result of the people he put around him. The reality is of course, the election was stolen from him, but, he should have expected this because we all did. And if it turns out that he actually just tweeted about it and didn't do anything to, he could have acted through executive order to, he used executive orders the least of any president in history, by far. And so he could have actually exercised his authority as the president of the United States to do something to secure our voting system and actually just bring, legislative pressure to Republican congressmen, especially House members that were up for re-election or whatever. And, and he didn't. So unless there is some massive, intricate plan at work, then the reality is that, it would have been his political inexperience. And, I think President Trump was a little bit too trusting, and I think he sort of thought that, you've heard him say, he expected when he got into office that everything would die down, and that people would just kind of accept he was the president or whatever. Clearly that wasn't the case. He didn't understand 90% of his own party would be actively trying to sabotage him. And so, and just throughout his presidency. And so with President Trump, I thought about it and I said, I think the way he looks at it is it would be like real estate. It would be like you shake someone's hand, you do a deal to each other's mutual benefit, and you move on. And what President Trump, I think, underestimated, assuming he loses, I think what he underestimated is that, these career politicians, they're shaking 6 different hands at any given time, and they're working all kinds of deals, and they're going to do only what's best for them. They don't care about what's best for you. There's no honor, there's no integrity. And if he doesn't indeed lose, then this will be what cost him. He surrounded himself with people that actively subverted him, and the closest members of his administration. How that pertains to America First, we'll just have to see. The reality is we're going to need to bring more people into the mainstream, and I personally think for any real authentic right-wing movement to come about, I think we're going to have to live through 8 to 12 years of unilateral leftist misery, because most just kind of boomers and stuff like that, they just don't get it yet, kind of where we're at, and they actually think that it's just about taxes and stuff. And so I think we're going to need the left to dominate, government, and visibly dominate. Not even though we know they dominated behind the scenes, we're going to need, every significant decision maker to have a D besides their name. And we're going to need them to drive things so far into the ground. And hopefully it's not so far gone and hopefully our election systems are fair to the point where we can, get a real movement out of it. And actually elect America First candidates who are actually willing to, voice the concerns of the people. So
the good news long term is that with this sort of populism, to go back historically, you look at the rise of these leaders who, after the social and moral decay of their country, their nation, whatever, take power. They tend to do so on a conservative but economically further left platform, right? I mean, famously, part of Caesar's major platform in gaining power, of course, was land reform. Part of Trump's policy was protectionism. As you see the sort of end of the boomer power in government and the rise of the younger generations, you're going to see more and more acceptance among conservatives for further left economic policies and further right cultural policies, which will hopefully enable a new sort of political power shift. The urban-rural divide has been a disaster for conservatives. As cities become more and more dense and immigrants flood into these cities, Republicans are losing more and more states just due to a series of only a handful of counties. If the Republicans and the an America First movement is going to get anywhere, it needs to do so on the back of a left-wing conservative populism that I don't know if Trump is capable of doing. I see Trump as a stepping stone. From now on, no one will ever trust an American election ever again. Not, at least not fully, not to the level they had historically. We're seeing an entire tide shift in the perception of our democracy, of our country, towards a skepticism. And as people become more skeptical, they will likewise become less willing to work simply within the bounds of the system. I don't know if you know Moldbug, Curtis Yavin. There's some quote by him that goes to the effect of a party that's unwilling to cheat is unable to rule. That the honesty of the Republican Party, its ability and its willingness to allow itself to be defeated in order to play by the rules that its opponents refuse to play by. This moral grandstanding of the Republican Party from the boomer generation has been its downfall. These compromises that have taken away gun rights, that have eroded conservative values time and time again. We need to stop playing by their rules, stop playing by their framework, and impose our own upon them.
I'm kind of in the middle on the same pages as both Kareem and Carter here. I think in a few different aspects. I think I'm holding out any sliver form of hope until what may happen on January 20th. I think if anything, there's a bit of a storm that's still brewing. I've been keeping up with a few different programs and podcasts, like War Room and a few other outlets. But it's very complicated. I'm not betting my my life on anything at this point. Literally within the year of 2020, anything can happen. I think what was brought up earlier about the Republican Party being very grandstanding and forgiving about all this stuff with rules that the opponent doesn't even play by. They just do essentially whatever they want and they get away with it because their base just allows them to do so. The media and everything that's tied to them is allowing them to do so. They will not be held to law or order or justice or anything. I think that within this major upset that these people, the honest people of America, do not believe the integrity of elections anymore. Speaking as somebody who literally stayed up all night between, just for context, my sleep schedule was super fucked up at the time, but I stayed up between 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. at home watching the election results. I mean, hell, I was in a election stream with Bruce.
Oh yeah.
Watching these fucking red states turn blue at 5 and 6 a.m. That just doesn't naturally happen, man. I think the age of, right-wing people, no matter how they exercise their right or their speech or anything like that, people are done turning the other cheek to this shit. They're tired of being stepped on. They are tired of these people that, run our country, that come into our country and just constantly shit on us and step on us, just horribly degrade the integrity and the hard work of the middle class and what the people really want here in this country. Of course, you'll always have the friend out there that's like a bleeding heart. They'll care about anything that they're told to care about. That happens. People are controlled that way. But I think it's definitely important to like focus. I hear the phrase being tossed around a lot. Focus on the signal, but don't focus on the noise. Don't look left and right, as was what said before. Look up. Look up to what's really happening. Don't look left and right.
One thing I would say is I think it's like, I think we have a slightly what is not confused, but a slightly the way we see it on Twitter. It's like we're online, we see people pissed off, we see like even like, oh, boomers are posting on Facebook or whatever, like about election fraud, and so we say, oh, we like to tell ourselves, oh, people are tired of it. The sad reality is they'll get a lot more tired. They will take a lot more before, and it's just a sad reality. No one is going to do anything, except maybe a tiny fraction of people. No one is going to do anything that would threaten their jobs, that would threaten their families as a result of this, as a result of a presidential election and what is ostensibly the beacon of democracy, a presidential election being stolen in that country. Nobody's going to do anything. Not me, not you, nobody. And the reality is we're just not at that place yet where people are at. If this was the left, because it is a secular religion, their politics, you guys should look into the concept of, bio-Leninism, which explains a lot of it. But anyways, people are going to take a lot more of it. My dad was like, if this goes through with President Trump, I may do something, because I said, President Trump's going to be in jail within 12 months. Because at Thanksgiving, I was saying, Trump's going to win. Like, he understands he's going to jail. And my dad was like, no, he's not going to jail. Like, why would he even go to jail? And I was like, Dad, did you see the Russia investigation? He's like, no. He's like, I wouldn't stand for that. People wouldn't stand for that. It's like, yeah, they would. Yeah, they would. Look at the impeachment. Look at the Russia investigation. That's part of America. You know what it is? It's a direct reflection of the decadency of this country, where even still, if you make it in this country, you have it pretty damn good. And you sit there and you think about, all right, you look at it in a binary perspective. Is it really this bad where I'm going to give up, my nice home, my job, my retirement, my family, and everything to go to jail for Donald Trump? Just the reality, whether it's right or wrong, is that 99.999% of even conservatives are going to say no. So that's why I think we have a much bigger drop off ahead. Things are going to have to get significantly worse to the point where there can be a massive movement, or the right leader who comes about and is able to make people realize just how bad things are, to actually galvanize people and organize and get people to stand up and fight and resist. So, I'll tell you, with that, like I said, I wish I could stick around longer, but I really do have to get off right here at about 11 o'clock. I'm just continuing to do finals and everything. But sorry to end on that. Sorry to end on that note or whatever.
Hey, no, we'll keep going for a little bit, but yeah, thanks for being on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem. I'm glad to be here, of course. Yeah, thank you, brother.
Yeah,
I
that was
appreciate it.
Carter. Everyone go follow him. His at is Alchemist Carter with a Q instead of the C.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Alchemist Carter
So thanks for
V2.
joining us, Carter. We'll talk to you another time.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Yep. We'll keep going for a little bit. But what do you guys think of that?
You go
No,
ahead.
you go first. You go, man. I'm not like 100% always the politic guy, so you can go on it.
So, I think the issue is that the sort of modern conservative regime is so focused on comfort, on familiarity, on, and these are things that should be cared about, don't get me wrong, to some extent. But I think there needs to be a situation where the cost benefit analysis for, actually doing something needs to be in the favor of doing something. Right now, we are so sedated, we are so indulgent that it's difficult for us to, justify to ourselves. Should I go out and, to go to the extreme, right? Think about what the founding fathers did. They said, I'm going to go out, I'm going to break into a politician's house, drag them out, and tar and feather them.
Yeah, I'm going to dress up as an Indian, and then I'm going to hop aboard the ship, and I'm going to toss the tea aside to the sea.
Yeah. That's how bad it was from their perspective.
Yeah, that's the thing. What's the catalyst of what's going to happen? What's the thing that's going to push people over the edge, Like that's kind of a hard thing to say, without kind of making these kind of wild analogies.
Yeah, it's
it's
impossible to know. In reality, it would probably be I see one of two possibilities. Either one, it will be some crazy event, something really bad will have to happen in the U.S.
Like a collapse or some kind of
a major crisis.
Yeah, a major crisis, even more of a crisis than what's happened with the coronavirus.
Or would have to be the U.S. losing its position as the global hegemon.
Yeah, especially to China, because that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah, the United States, the secular moralism of the U.S. is a pretty scary thing. I mean, just to think about it, right? I mean, think of the the paradox of tolerance. Oh, if you tolerate intolerance,
the Karl Popper thing.
Yeah. Well, do you understand what that's talking about? Like, when you think about it, that's obviously not talking about like sexism or racism, because supposedly by their definition, America was sexist and racist and homophobic, and yet now we're tolerant. So that's not what they're talking about. So what is this intolerance that they mean? For them, intolerance is anything that opposes the liberal hegemons. What they fear isn't any sort of social policy, but a political structure. People who do not want to, basically want to get rid of democracy, liberal democracy. The thing they want to get rid of is intolerance to the elites, the status quo. It's all smoke and mirrors. It always is, right? People who it's like the right, obviously. You see online right wingers who are convinced that the Democratic Party are communist. I mean, Carter brought up bio-Leninism, which is this idea of you basically rely on people who, or you give people who rely on the government to give them any sort of power. You give them positions of power because it creates this feedback loop where they're reliant on the government, so they help the government so they can maintain their power. So you give like a pedophile a presidential office because without being the president, or without having the government, he wouldn't have any power, so he's loyal to the system. The thing about that is that is not really what Lenin himself did, or what the communists did during the Bolshevik revolution. That is pure liberalism. It's only under liberalism where these things happen, where the power, that comes from the consent of the ruled, where the power comes from this abstract sense, at least in a philosophical sense, but where in reality power comes from money, power comes from wealth. This has been something that has been, you go all the way back to Plato's Republic. He writes about how oligarchs create this divide between the rich and poor, because if your power relies on money, then you need to be essentially abusive in order to maintain your power, because money's a resource and eventually you can use it up. So you need to keep getting more, and how do you get more while also, suppressing the lower people? You exploit them. And so, to me, I see the way forward as a sort of an anti-capitalist, not necessarily anti-market. Something like, Catholic distributism is an idea. Something like that. An anti-capitalist, pro-religious, pro-conservative sort of movement.
Yeah. Something that is actually right-wing. Something that is not just like, don't get me wrong, I don't hate evangelicals, but we've seen this kind of evangelical kind of hegemony here in the, especially in the GOP, where they just kind of dangle the keys of, oh yeah, we believe in God, come vote for us. It's actually going to be something that is actually conservative, something that is actually somewhat reactionary.
Yeah, as Catholic people, there's this fear that are you familiar with the? I've probably talked about this with you before in private, but the Fatima miracle. There's like the three prophecies. So one of the three prophecies speaks about, so if Russia isn't converted, then World War II will start. Basically, is what it says. Well, it says a war even worse than World War I will break out under the reign of Pius XII, which was World War II. But that eventually Russia will be consecrated to the Sacred Heart. If Russia, which is right now stepping up to be the number one geopolitical rival of the sort of American world order, because China's been integrated into it. If Russia's stepping up to that, does that mean we're going to be the bad guy? Does that mean the United States is going to end up as sort of the villain in that sense? I think that's a really real fear to live with. And do you think that the Protestants, the evangelicals, who from their very starting point have opposed, their very identity's opposition to Rome, do you think they'll be the ones to lead us out of that, lead us to a better future? I don't think so. And even within, I'm sure you're familiar with the Catholic clergy in the United States is very, very corrupt. There has been several papers or studies that have come out on them showing that over half of them are homosexuals.
Yeah, and especially me being Pennsylvania is actually quite poignant, because we remember what happened a while back with the diocese here in Pennsylvania with the Catholic Church, where there was uncovered that there was a lot of sexual assault, sexual harassment between a lot of members of the clergy and between women and children.
Yeah, it's so there's a really real fear that the U.S. will basically be unable to overcome its sort of moral degradation and have to be. That doesn't mean not to try. That doesn't. I'm not trying to be black pillar here. Say the U.S. is doomed. I'm just saying that the path forward is very unclear for the U.S. for any sort of Catholic conservative movement in the U.S.
So I do want to move on to maybe a different topic. Oh, somebody asked about corporate feudalism and the points of agreement between the populist left and populist right. How you feel about that?
Well, that's basically my whole. That's basically where I'm at, is the intersection there. I think that eventually the So if you understand Marxists, you understand Marxist theory. Their whole concept is a divorce from sort of political systems and morality. That they have this concept. I mean, if you read, the left communists like Bordega, or even you just read, like Lenin or someone like that, they are in direct opposition to this idea of a sort of uh, moralistic idea of politics. I mean, Bordega said as much as like we should not even like democracy might not even be what's best for the left, and we're talking about the most left communists being like the most orthodox Marxists of all. The problem with the right, the populist right, which the populist left does not have, is that it is so entrenched in the economic system and capitalism in markets that I think it's going to be a hard sell to try to talk them out of this, this sort of mindset, especially in the United States where, I mean, we're a young country and capitalism has been most of our history, right? In England, they can look back to feudalism and they can say, look at this is most of our history up until this point. We don't have that luxury here in the U.S. Conservative, a conservative person is in the U.S. a liberal. The most traditionalist, pro-American sort of ideology is this sort of Enlightenment liberalism. So you would need an entire shift of the sort of American mythology. It would take. I don't know what it would take. You have people like Pat Buchanan and whatnot who are a possible path forward. I mean, Pat Buchanan published an article. I don't know how long ago, talking about basically an anti-democracy sort of position. It just seems like the actual populist left is so small, and the populist right is so entrenched in capital that it will take maybe decades before you see any sort of real ability to escape this sort of framework.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So I actually do want to move on to questions. Actually, we have a few questions here. This one comes from Puppethead. What events slash which people helped you come to your current political beliefs?
Bit of a hard one to really say. A lot of people think of them as a bit of a, I don't know, like bit of a joke, but honestly, entry level was kind of, I mean, for me, was actually Rageaholic. I thought he had some pretty convincing arguments, like especially like in 2016 politically, and from there I kind of just expanded my taste outwards and just saw like who else was out there on the spectrum of like the alt media circles on tech sites and whatever else, whether it be like big stuff like YouTube or like other stuff now, like there's stuff like Odyssey and Rumble and BitChute, and just following them on there. I think he's the biggest one for me, but then there's other people out there like honestly, like in a way, like keeping in contact with Bruce for a while has kind of helped me shift my opinions more and more towards where I'm at now. And I think currently it's kind of hard to judge, but I think currently the one that I line up the most with ideologically is a user by the name of Salty Cracker. I really like his videos and the way that he adds all of his commentary into current topic discussions and stuff. Really like his content. He's got a great energy to him, and I think he, out of all of the newer people that I watch, that I've started to watch actually within the past year, I think I like him the most. So you could say that that he's a big influence as far as what I think now.
Hmm. That's very interesting. Yeah, I do want to talk a little bit about like my political inspirations. So growing up as a kid, I wasn't really that interested in politics. I mean, I did watch like kind of like this satire stuff about George W. Bush and all that kind of stuff, but I wasn't like I didn't really get it. But when I did get involved with politics, I was always raised Catholic. I was raised more conservative, and like for example my family living in El Salvador, they did vote right wing. But someone that kind of really brought me to the that kind of brought forward that kind of that side of me was probably kind of Donald Trump himself, because he was actually the one that kind of I mean, if it weren't for a populist figure like Donald Trump, I probably would have been probably just a Daily Wire type, a Ben Shapiro slash Rhino type. I probably would have worked at I don't know, the Daily Caller or whatever. Or but yeah, no, he was I mean, he wasn't. I mean, obviously, we've seen in his presidency, like what Carter said, he was definitely too open to being manipulated. But I think like what was so important about Trump was that he was kind of bringing forward ideas that were that were dissident in this to the right wing, like about protectionism, about the stuff about immigration, the stuff about like all of this stuff. And I mean, right now I've been reading like certain people. I've been reading Pat Buchanan. I've been trying to read. I have a few books that I've been meaning to read, but actually, Cream Man here actually recommended to me that I read. Who was it? Alexander Dugan. Yeah, I've been I actually have him in my library. I just need to take time because I haven't had time. But another figure that I've been really kind of looking forward to is actually Nayib Bukele, who I mentioned before was the president of El Salvador. I mean, let me give you a little bit of context about how the political system actually kind of worked in El Salvador. So it was kind of similar to the states here, that it was two parties dominated. There was the left wing FMLN party, which was formed after the Civil War. I mean, it was a leftist group of guerrillas during the Civil War, but after the war, it became a legal political party. And then on the right was Arena, which was the Republican Alliance for something something. And these two parties, since the Civil War ended in '92, were in power. Then you had a figure like Nayib Bukele, who was a very not a very rich man. I mean, he was very rich, but not to the level of someone like Donald Trump. He was involved in real estate, and he got himself a lot of fame and money for it, and he decided to enter into politics. And he actually was in the left wing party, but because he was getting a little bit too populist for them, they kicked him out of the party. Then he went he every single time afterwards he would start a political party. The governing bodies would try to make it illegal, and they did that a lot. And so he went with this conservative party called Ghana, which was it never achieved power. It never had a single seat in the legislature. And he no, first actually he was the mayor of San Salvador, which was the capital of the city of the country. And I can definitely ask my family members this, but he definitely made things a lot better over there, because the biggest example of that is when I went to the center of the city where they had the presidential palace and they had the main cathedral there. It was it was clean, it was nice, it was beautiful actually. There was a lot more nightlife going on. And before his reign, actually in the city, there would be in that same spot where the cathedral and the presidential palace would stand, there would be all these shanty little markets, little mercados. There would be kind of gang activity going on there. And so he actually, when he came into power as the mayor, he revitalized all these different parts of the city. And he also did this kind of thing. So with his record, he actually was able to run with this small little party called Ghana, and he was able to win the presidential election in El Salvador. And I think it's very interesting because right now actually they've been trying to do all kind of things. They were trying to say that he's trying to plan a coup in the country, that he's trying to throw journalists in jail, or he's and especially people from the United Nations and other like the Human Rights Caucus or whatever. Recently, earlier this year, he actually before during the in the early stages of the coronavirus pandemic when it hit El Salvador in early March, he actually was very strict on the gangs on MS-13, MS-18, and a few others I'm forgetting the names of. But there was these infamous pictures that came out about that he was that they were being put together in all these really close quarters, that they were uh, putting up what are they called, like walls, kind of walls in between the cells, because so they wouldn't communicate with each other. And everybody in the media, especially here in the States, they were calling him autocratic, they were calling him a fascist. So I mean, but the thing is that everybody has they have a very good approval rating of him. I think he's around I mean, more than 90% approval rating in the country, and people know why, because he's been expanding infrastructure, especially during this pandemic. He's been helping people with giving them supplies, food, all this different stuff. And I mean, he isn't perfect like all leaders, but what he's doing is he's trying to stop the brain drain of mass immigration from El Salvador, because it's not only an issue here in the States, it's also an issue over there, because there's a lot of brain drain going on. And but yeah, no, it's very interesting how he's kind of shifting this Overton window of what is possible in a leadership in a country that is so politically volatile and unstable like El Salvador. You
I
want to
would
go?
have to actually. Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
go
Just
ahead. Go ahead.
one.
Go ahead.
I would say one last thing. I would actually have to say as well. I don't know why I didn't even mention it sooner, but yeah, Trump himself was actually a reason why my views have shifted to the way that they are now. They were a huge stepping stone because I remember in 2015, I was a skeptic of like what the hell was even going on myself. Like early on with like campaigns and stuff that led up to 2016. And I remember saying to my dad, it's just like, God, there's already so much going on. I don't want to hear about this. I hate everything going on right now. I don't like either of the candidates or, whatever else, blah, blah, blah. Whoever's being likely chosen to lead their parties. And by the end of 2016, when Trump actually pulled it out, I was completely on his side. It was really something I didn't expect, and in that regard, I kind of have to thank him for showing me where I stand now myself too. So
Yeah, it's very interesting. What do you think, Cree man? What's your who are some figures that really helped you shape your political opinions?
Well, in terms of some people I know personally, part of my big transformation politically was in the True Diltom community. I had joined there. I had watched a bunch of his videos, and one of the people who there's some people who like softened me to certain ideas. APOC, who is a good Orthodox Christian. He just had his first kid not too long ago. My buddy Dowd, who, sort of introduced me to philosophy more in depth. One of my friends, Damascene, who helped me get even deeper into philosophy and sort of theology. In terms of, thinkers and whatnot, I'm a big fan of Henry David Thoreau, the American transcendentalist author. I'm a big fan of Theodore J. Kaczynski, the Unabomber, edgy take, edgy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cut the power lines.
I mean, obviously Alexander Dugin is one of my main thinkers that I, sort of attach my thinking to. his book, The Fourth Political Theory, is sort of completely changed the way I look at the world in terms of politics. Trying to think of any other real big in particular names. I mean, in terms of, I had always been sort of a political person. Even from a young age, I was sort of intrigued by politics. My great grandmother used to tell me about politics. I didn't understand what she was talking about, but I remember a few things where she hated Newt Gingrich. She hated Newt Gingrich because he left his wife. Well, she had cancer. He divorced her. Yeah. So she hated Newt Gingrich so much, so goddamn much. And I sort of always had this idea about politics. I spent a long time as a basic bitch, sort of libertarian type, that's another person I gotta say is Hans Hermann Hoppe sort of really helped me escape sort of this gay libertarian mindset. Big fan of Hoppe. If you're like a libertarian, you should read Hoppe and stop being a libertarian, basically, or just become a Hoppian, or just become a Hoppian.
Yeah, that's at least Hoppian.
That's at least bearable. At least then you'll be not retarded.
Yeah, like a Lobert.
Yeah, I mean, I've been reading a lot of leftist theory recently, but I can't say anything in particular stands out to me. Like, I've read Lenin, and I've still haven't read Das Kapital. I should at some point, but I've read the Communist Manifesto, and some like assorted writings of Marx, and I've read I was talking about Bordega earlier, or they might not even know how to pronounce his name, but it doesn't matter. And then the Italian thinker Julius Evola was very influential on me. So I got influence from all over the place. I mean, 2016 really radicalized me a lot. I think, as you both were saying, that was definitely a turning point for me as well. I had always sort of been this America First sort of person. But sort of seeing that, democracy was sort of a failure, seeing the media, seeing that like the American sort of mythology was all fake, was like it was like waking up from a dream, Yeah, I guess I can't really think of anything else at the top of my head. I'm sure in like an hour I'll have like, oh, I should have brought up this person or this whatever, but that's about it for now.
Yeah, same for me. But I have been reading a lot more books, especially about immigration. Like I've been reading Peter Brummelo and George Borjas. I think that's what his name. And I do want to also focus on the the immigration aspect, because I mean, just because you're like you have relation to immigrants doesn't mean that you can have like a certain opinion about it. But yeah, no. What's that?
I would say I've gotten shit from my family for being anti-immigration in general, because I mean, I'm the descendant of Armenian genocide survivors who escaped to the U.S. Right? It's like, oh, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for immigrants.
Yeah, that's what they all say. That they say. So
even
think about.
Even
and
me,
they also try
guy,
to tug at your heartstrings also.
Yeah. So even me as like a white guy, I even get that. I even get that little bit. I'm sure you get it a lot more. You would deal with more of that bullshit. I mean, the darker skin you are, proportionally more they'll try to tell you how really you're just fooled. I'm
fooled by the white man.
Yeah. Oh, that's what is it? Slavoj Žižek talks about that a lot. How?
Oh, isn't that the leftist thinker?
Yeah. He talks about how he actually talks to minorities. He talks to like natives in the U.S. and he said, yeah, we don't want to be called Native Americans. We want to be called Indians, because the name Indian is like they think of it as like spiteful to white people. It's like, wow, you guys are idiots. You thought we were Indians. You know.
Yeah.
That they interpret the exact opposite way that left wing intellectuals, and then he's talking about how he would go have a debate with these people, and he would bring up these points, and they say, you can't think that, you can't say that, that's racist, and shut him down, and how like saying that you are a horrible, guilty, horrible, evil white person who's so sorry gives you power in academia. Because our morality, our sort of liberal moralism is built around weakness. That weak people are thought of as somehow morally superior to strong people.
The immigration aspect is something that I also find interesting. I mean, I also, I consider myself a very strong Roman Catholic. I do go to church. I do read the Bible. I've been raised. I went to Catholic school. And that's also a different aspect. It's not only just about kind of economics for me and the social aspect. I mean, also the social aspect. But it's kind of like I've kind of noticed that I've noticed that a lot of my peers in high school, I'm in college now, but a lot of my peers in high school, a lot of them I assume that maybe it's just because their parents took them to Catholic school because it was private. They're pretty much, I've seen, I mean, if you just look at their Instagram stories, they're pretty much just like liberal,
Yeah, I mean that's how it goes, right? It's just what's the saying? It's like first communions become like graduating from going to church. It's sad. Or is it confirmation? One or the other. Whatever.
It's confirmation.
Confirmation.
Yeah, confirmation. My bad. So it's like, yeah, it's there is no real place in our modern secular society for that, and so the liberalism is sort of the enemy of any sort of conservatism, whether it be
Christian,
secular, even secular, like an actual secular conservatism. An authentic one is even authentic to our modern sort of secular moralism. Like, I mean, do you think the Romans, with their like sort of civic religion, would they have been able to survive in this climate? Of course not. Because nothing comes first anymore. Like, there's no sort of higher goal to strive for. You aren't allowed to have a higher calling. You aren't allowed to have any sort of larger goal or larger belonging. You're forced to be an individual. You're forced to do all these things. It's the most totalitarian regime in human history. And it's totally under our noses. We don't even notice it. We don't even feel it. They control what you think, what you're allowed to say, what you're allowed to feel, right? Like, just think about how insidious, even something as simple as this is also something Slavoj Žižek talked about, where back in traditional sort of family, the father would say, "I don't care whether or not you want to go to your, grandmother's house, you're going, whether you like it or not," right? Today, what does the father do? He says, well, your grandmother wants you to be there, Your grandmother, how would she feel if you didn't go? So not only are they telling you that you have to go, they're telling you you have to want to go. That's sort of thinking where not only do you have to accept the state, you have to want it. Otherwise, you're bad. Otherwise, you're a bad
you're a
person.
dissident, and you should be kind of dealt with in a way that is not pleasant. I mean, we should have brought this up with Carter, because he definitely brought this up, in his tweets and a lot of the streams that he was doing. But big tech, we were talking earlier about the Great Reset, and Carter made a great point, I think, in one of his streams, which was recently turned into a video, that the biggest, the people, the industries that are getting the most amount of capital, of resources, of money in the midst of this global pandemic and recession is big tech. Places, corporations like Alphabet, who own Google and YouTube, Facebook, who own Facebook, who own Instagram and WhatsApp, and who else? Amazon, who own the Washington Post, and a lot of these different corporations. Disney, who owns ABC, and a multitude of other corporations. They control the narrative. You remember when Joe Biden was elected on the 7th, they were making this huge push to make it almost like legitimate. They were it was obvious that there was some kind of voter fraud, but they were trying to make it seem like there was this, like, he was the savior of democracy, that he was this catalyst that defeated fascism, the orange fascism. And and you can tell that a lot of these social media companies and the news media, they were so elated when this development happened. Like, even when they were fact checking, they had these elated kind of reasonings for Joe Biden. If the left wing were saying that there were voter fraud in a way that there wasn't, they probably wouldn't have, like, kind of fact checked them like they would have if it were the opposite. You know.
Well, once again, they're afraid of Trump. They're Trump. I don't think was ever going to get anything done, but they're so afraid of Trump because Trump represents basically the threat to their power, and they were always going to do everything in their grasp to stop Trump.
Even if people inside the GOP were trying to subvert him.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Trump is the I want to say the first president, at least in a long time, not to start a war while in office.
And that might sound like, to any random people that would be like, oh yeah, he didn't start a war. But think about how significant that is. You look back at maybe even like how far back, maybe even Harry Truman. At one point, at least every single one of these presidents has either started a war or escalated a war. Harry Truman, it was Korea. With Ronald Reagan, it was the invasion of Panama, of Grenada, of military intervention in Lebanon. With and especially in this current generation, with I think it really started with Bill Clinton, with Yugoslavia, with George Bush, obviously Iraq and Afghanistan. You had Obama, you had Libya, and other kind of undertakings in Syria. But with Donald Trump, the only thing that I could really think about was the limited strike that happened on the Syrian airfield in 2017.
And I feel like even that, I mean, for me, I wasn't a fan of that in general. I mean, I understand he was sort of forced to do so, but even that, I would be against. I mean, the thing is, if you saw the DNC this year, you saw war criminals at the DNC talking about how they need to go to war.
Colin Powell. Oh, yeah, Colin Powell, dude.
And remember Joe Biden? Joe Biden was the one on the Democratic Party who was basically the main person to call the Democrats into the war. He was the voice of the Democratic side of the war hawks. We're sold this image, of peace, but they said at the DNC they're done with the Marshall Plan, basically the biggest example of American intervention overseas outside of a major war ever. That is their standard for American greatness. They don't want you as an American to integrate into your communities. They don't want you to have strong families. They don't care about that. They don't care about anything that you value. They want you to be international citizens who own nothing, who have no morals, who have no social boundaries, who just live to consume. I mean the Sam Hyde quote, when we win, don't forget they want your kids dead. They want you dead, your kids raped, and they think it's funny, something like that.
Yeah, that's such a true quote. I think about that quote a lot, and especially what we've seen, because it's increasingly looking like it's gonna be Joe Biden gonna be 46th president of the United States, and what have we seen from his current quote unquote president elect cabinet? You have Tony Blinken. And who was Tony Blinken? He was literally part of the cabal that was trying to permit, military incursions into, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and Libya. And so you see all these powers, that are trying to kind of incorporate into the Joe Biden, presidency, administration. And it's so fitting to see that people are not focusing on aspects like that, that they're focusing on at least we have a president who believes in science. At least we have a president who believes in who's nice to people.
Well, yeah, nobody voted for Joe Biden. People voted not Trump. Yeah, nobody. Who wanted Joe Biden? Who did you see anybody? I had never met anybody who supported Biden from like.
I saw when I would drive around the entire the county, I would see like signs of the Biden Harris thing.
I mean during the No, before the like who in the primaries.
Oh yeah, no, Bernie Sanders was. We kind of forgot that who was it? It was Joe Biden that went forth in when was it in Iowa?
Yeah. So I saw Bernie Sanders signs. I saw Warren signs. I saw Yang signs. I saw what the hell is the guy's name? Whatever. I saw like signs of like half of the candidates. Buttigieg. No, I'm talking about the other guy. The more conservative leaning guy. More Republican leaning guy. I can't think of his name. Kasich.
John Kasich.
Is that his name? Yeah, John Kasich. I saw like Kasich signs. I didn't see one Biden sign. Nowhere did I see.
Until Bernie Sanders completely lost.
Yeah, until Sanders lost, exactly.
I think we definitely seen people like Buttigieg and Yang drop out because they were trying to prop up Joe Biden. And you even saw that I think even Donald Trump himself said that Elizabeth Warren was to blame for Bernie Sanders' downfall in the 2020 primary.
Yeah, I'd almost feel bad for Bernie if he wasn't himself. If Bernie wasn't Bernie, I'd feel bad for him.
Yeah, more and more, I actually kind of feel bad for him. I mean, I don't really like him, but I feel bad for him.
He does it to himself. I mean, he put all his donations. Like, yeah. Here's the thing about social democrats: is social democrats are they just follow whatever the status quo says.
Except maybe they're a little bit more, more rowdy.
You say that, but the social democrats were the ones who allied with the Nazi regime. They were the ones who invited the Nazis into Austria. And they were the ones they marched with Mussolini on Rome. Like, it's like, yeah, the social democrats. This idea that they're like these progressive Marxists is so funny. If you oppose fascism, your first target should be Bernie Sanders.
But actually, we have a last question. This question comes from our good friend Sage. He says, for everyone, how do you see the media and the academy apparatus being defeated? And how long do you think it will take?
What does he mean by the, what was it again, actually?
How do you see the media and academia apparatus being defeated, and how long do you think it will take?
Don't fucking give them money, for one thing. And I think it's kind of hard to tell when that will be, but probably within the next... Unless there's a serious reform, maybe, like, within, like, 2-3 decades. A lot of it's going to fucking collapse because several people, like rates for going to college have been dropping. Mainstream media channels on television alone, and even like enthusiasm for watching YouTube uploads of these shows and these creators that are normally on cable television, they're dropping immensely, and it's because people have been tuning them out, and people are making them scared that they do not have the grasp that they once had over the general public, or at least a good chunk of the general public that has been vindicated and alienated by who used to be entertainers and teachers and whoever believes in the left. They are a dying breed as far as just trying to maintain control over the population, especially here in America. But I believe that it'll be a long, drawn out, painful fucking death for that. Probably.
I mean, they're going to lose inevitably. It's just a matter of time. Time period, like how long it's gonna take.
I would say maybe in the next maybe 50 years. I think maybe 50 years is maybe something that is gonna bring out maybe some kind of shift.
Well, how long?
I don't know when, because
Well, I think like how long did it take? How long did this take in, like historically, like this sort of process where, you know, the institutions of civilization have been undermined. I mean, it took, sort of, Christendom. It took it centuries for it to break apart totally. You look at Rome, you know, the period of the sort of civil wars lasted about 200 years almost. So, but the thing is, nowadays, due to technology and how fast information gets around, this sort of process has been speeding up. So it could be, it could happen tomorrow for all we know. It could happen in 150 years. I know that's like a cop-out, but it's like the given conditions, anything could happen at any moment which would allow, you know, a sort of total political tide shift. So, for me to say, you know, 100 years, I could be way off. You know, tomorrow morning, tomorrow morning there was like every single member of the U.S. government got assassinated at the same time. You know, who knows? But yeah, it's like I know it's probably gonna happen within the next 100 years. That seems like the most likely thing, just because, you know, on top of everything, you have all these contradictions, all these issues. There's the declining rate of profit, which is becoming more and more of an issue, where basically corporations in a market, as that sort of as they become more efficient, the profit per commodity decreases over time. So eventually you reach this point where, you know, they start stripping benefits, they start lowering wages, they start automating. And when it gets to the point where enough Americans are suffering with no way out, where they feel like their only hope is to, you know, get violent, get rowdy, that'll be the point. But how long that'll take, who knows?
there's definitely something that I do want to kind of elaborate on. I know there's a lot of people, maybe even people that are listening to this, that think that that the United States is going to at least is going to go through some kind of collapse or balkanization or any kind of maybe collapse under its own weight. How do you guys feel about that argument?
It's a bit of a heavy topic to really let sink in, but I think within the next... there is an unbelievable divide right now. I mean, that's just... you can't get around that. And I think what people underestimate about the whole situation is that it's not going to magically go away. If things go as they are in the direction that the left wants it to, I think it's going to take another a few decades. I think it'll be like less time that we may even expect. Like, you know, people say like that won't happen, and for another, you know, like 3, 4, 5, going on like several on decades. I think it's sooner than we expect it to be, and I don't think it would be outright collapse, but I think we are approaching a huge tipping point in terms of just overall tolerance to just, I mean, what Carter was saying earlier, I mean, I hate to admit, I somewhat agreed with him on the idea that, you know, you have these people which, you know, generally speaking, you know, are good people having their lives ruined because they risk the idea that they are outspoken in terms of a political ideology for a president that they happen to want to vote for. Um, Having that and having like big tech media, especially, come under and essentially start to silence people under what they call their policies. I mean, YouTube especially rolled out this awful, awful policy recently regarding that whole thing. Um, that is not sustainable in a constitutional republic where you have to keep making the other side shut up and forcibly shut up. You know, they are not. Nobody on the right likes the fact that they have their videos removed. Nobody likes the fact that if you go out with like something as innocuous as like a hat on your head, you get spit in the face or punched.
Yeah, or you get your PayPal removed or your Twitter suspended.
Yeah, I mean, even with like, you know, content creators with Patreons getting suspended as well, it keeps removing like you take away everybody's freedoms as to how they earn a living. You will see the starvation really bubble to the surface, and people will not allow it anymore. If it can happen historically, where all that people do, this authoritative government or whatever else, keeps taking away the freedoms of the people, there will be an unbelievable whiplash to this. I truly believe that, man.
What do you think, Cream Man, about the question about balkanization or kind of collapsing?
Nah, I don't think it's gonna happen. At that point, the U.S. balkanizes. That's the end of the world. That's over. I know. That's
when the book of Revelation happens.
Yeah.
Christ
yeah.
comes back to judge the living and the dead.
Yeah, unironically, like that's the end. That's game over.
Yeah, the book of Revelation is just. I mean, that's just when America's gonna end.
Don't take this too seriously, but I mean, if you look at historically, right? We're at the third, basically the third civilization, right? So you have Bronze Age civilization, you have classical civilization, and you have this sort of civilization now that rose out of the Dark Ages to today. How many acts does an average play have? Oh, 3 acts? Wow. And, weird, you know. Ever notice how, you know, there's sort of this poetry and sort of foreshadowing and all these thematic narrative tools all throughout the Bible? Weird. It's almost like it's there's some sort of artistry to history. I don't know. This isn't for certain. This isn't. This is just, you know, thinking. This is like some schizo shit. But I don't know. It would make a lot of sense if we're reaching the end. But people have been saying that for 1,000 years now. So
this was actually a pretty good discussion. You know, we didn't have Carter here for the entire time, but it was a pretty good discussion nonetheless. But I just want to say before we sign off that this episode is actually sponsored by Anchor. Anchor is the podcast hosting website, and you know, we don't have a sponsorship on this episode. I mean, on this video on YouTube, but we do have a sponsorship on the audio side because we recently just switched audio providers from Podbean to Anchor, and now on Anchor, I mean, the SnoopCast is still gonna be on platforms like on Spotify, on iTunes, on Google Podcasts, but it's also on new platforms. The SnoopCast is now on Breaker, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, and Spotify. If you use any of those platforms, feel free to listen to the show. Feel free to give us some ratings because we really like to appreciate it. We really like to hear your thoughts on this. And I think that's all. So my name is Bruce. Thanks for listening to the show. Say goodbye, guys.
See.
Take care, everybody.
Yep. So we had Cream Man, Ian, and our good friend Carter. Feel free to follow them on social media. I know that Ian doesn't have Twitter, but he has Instagram. But feel free to follow me, Carter, and Cream Man on Twitter. And other than that, thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time.